Hello and welcome. So welcome to this live Q&A on training as a woman. I'm just shifting around the camera because everything looked well set up until I started, and now I'm disappearing off screen. There we go. Hello. So welcome to this live Q&A on training as a woman. I'm just checking across on Instagram and making sure that things are updating on there. I think there's just a bit of a delay. There it is. Perfect. So I've had a few questions in advance, but I'm definitely still taking questions in as we go. So please do feel free to pop them into the chat as we go, and I will do my best to keep an eye on them all and to answer them. First of all, just to introduce myself to those of you who don't know me. So my name's Lucy. I run Feel Fit with Lucy, which is about supporting female runners and triathletes to feel their best as well as train their best. So training to get fitter, to get faster towards whatever your goal is, but also making sure that we feel good while we do that we're not just throwing a load of training at our bodies and arguably feeling worse for it. So getting there happy and healthy is just as important for me as the training goal itself. I think I'm the UK's, well, I know I'm the UK's first, I think I'm the UK's only mental health and exercise and triathlon coach. And for me, those two sides to what I do are just as important as each other. I'm just as passionate about the mental health and exercise side as the triathlon side, and making sure that our exercise supports our mental health and helps us to become happier, healthier human beings at the end of the day. I work mostly one-to-one with clients, but I also do club coaching, and I also have a membership for female runners and triathletes who want to build their training towards those goals. It's just £25 a month, and you get a whole load of support. You get masterclasses, you get Q&As, you get one-to-one coaching sessions, you get weekly strength and conditioning and mobility sessions all in there each month. So if you're interested in that, please do let me know. Find me at Feel Fit with Lucy on whatever social media medium you are looking at me on. In terms of today, this is a Q&A, but this is part of a series of events that I'm running this week as a run-up to International Women's Day, which is this Saturday, I think. So I am also running an event on Wednesday on how to maximize your training as a woman. It's at 12:15 and then it's repeated at 7 p.m. So if you're interested in joining that, you can sign up on my website. And I will give you a URL to do that with in a second. There we go. Oh, here we go. Right, there we go. So if you sign up on my website, you can register for that Q&A. Sorry, that session on maximizing your training as a woman. And then I've also got a session on Thursday on menopause and training. So I'll be touching on working with your cycle, things like that, and menopause today, but I'll be going into way more detail in that session on Wednesday and that session on Thursday on menopause. So do register at my website if you want to sign up for either of those. And I think, I've got too many different things here. If I flash that up, does that work? That is if you're not already on your phone, then you can flash that up and you can get the code or the URL for registering for my website for those talks. Sorry, I'm trying to do too many different things at once, for those talks on Wednesday and Thursday. So let's kick off with the questions I've already got. But as I say, please do pop any questions you've got into the chat as we go. Let me get rid of that so I can see you again. So I got lots of questions in about energy and trying to make sure we have enough energy for our training. Sometimes related to menstrual cycle, sometimes just saying I feel bloody knackered just because of life and everything else that is going on. I talk a lot more about this in those sessions, as I say, that I've got coming up on Wednesday and on Thursday. But the three things I would say are most important, and these would go for men as well, but they're so much more important for women. Number one, make sure you are taking a rest week. I did a talk earlier today, and I would say the majority of the women I was talking to there said that they didn't take a rest week. Taking a rest week is really important in terms of making sure that our bodies recover. So when we train, we break down our bodies. So the rate of increase of the breaking down is going up, going up, going up. If we just keep on training without resting, we just keep on breaking down our bodies. We need that rest week where our training comes down a bit. It's not that we do nothing. It's just that we reduce the intensity, take out some of the intensity, and we reduce the volume. Depends what your normal week looks like as to the specifics of that. But we do less training so that our body gets a chance to recover. So then we can start building up again, but we're building up from a higher part or a higher point. Remember, we don't get fitter from training. When we train, we break our body down. We get fitter from recovery from training. So we need that rest week. So in terms of energy for life and for your training, number one, take that rest week. I'd also say take a rest day each week. And there's other things as well, but take that rest week. Number two, make sure you're eating enough. As women, we are particularly bad at fueling ourselves. I don't think I've met a woman that doesn't at some point, whether consciously or subconsciously, relate their training to burning calories. And we go into those training sessions trying to burn as many calories as we can, even if we're not sort of doing that so consciously. And so it's really hard for us to think about fueling our training, but we have to fuel our training. As women, we're far more sensitive to not having enough energy on board. Our body reacts much worse to it. But when we don't have enough energy on board, we can't train so hard, and we certainly can't recover so well. So make sure you're taking enough energy in the form of carbohydrates for your training sessions before, during, and after. Depends what you're doing as to how much you need of each of those. And also make sure you're getting enough protein. Again, women are really bad, in my experience, at getting enough protein in. And we, as women, are really prone to losing our muscle as well as our bones as we go through perimenopause. So we need that muscle to be protected for as long as possible. And protein as well as strength training is one of the ways we can do that. So make sure you get enough carbs, make sure you're getting enough protein. And then finally, in terms of working with your energy, get to know your body and your menstrual cycle. And I know for some of us, we can have maybe no obvious menstrual cycle, especially if we're in perimenopause. It just feels like there's chaos all over the place. But try and track things and try and spot those patterns so that you know when you're feeling strong, so you can get your good sessions in when you're feeling strong, and you know to rest when you're not, because there's just no point in fighting your body. Let's learn to work with our bodies rather than against our bodies. So as I say, there's much more on all of that in my talks on Wednesday and Thursday this week. Register at my website, feelfitwithlucy.co.uk, to attend those talks. But that is hopefully a sort of good starter for 10. Okay, next question in. I got a question saying from somebody who was saying that food cravings completely derail her training. She craves anything unhealthy and sweet and savory just for a few days of the month. She knows that for the rest of the month, she's fairly balanced, so she doesn't worry too much, but what could she do to rein it in on those few days? My first question back to her would be, why are you getting those cravings? Often around our menstrual cycle, we get cravings because we're actually lacking something. We know that we need a few more calories, maybe sort of a few hundred more around when we actually have our periods or coming up to that point. So it might just be that our body knows it needs that bit more energy. We often have different body temperature and different hydration needs around our period. So it might be that our body's actually craving some sort of hydration. And so if we're craving the salty stuff, it might be because we're looking for something to help hydrate us. So listen to your body. It might actually be that it's telling you what it needs. Make sure that if you are, as she says, she's kind of relaxed about those cravings, and that's my approach as well with any kind of cravings, whether it's related to menstrual cycle or generally. The more we try and deny ourselves stuff, the more we want it. So trying to make sure that actually we just keeping a hold on it, making sure that we're not going too hard with anything, not having too much of anything, maybe building it into the rest of the month, knowing that we'll have that uptake at the end of the month. So maybe we want to create a little bit of space for it earlier in the month, but be fairly relaxed about it. But if you are taking on more calorie dense stuff in the form of sweet and savory stuff, then make sure you're still getting your nutrition in, and think, are there some swaps that you could have in there? So is there something that could be healthy but gives you that kind of sweet and savory craving fix? So something like some apples with peanut butter, maybe some dried fruit, some Marmite Twiglets, something that isn't really, really fatty, particularly isn't really inflammatory. Sugary stuff and fried stuff tends to be quite inflammatory. And when we've got our period, that's when we're on our most inflamed state in the month. And we don't want to add to that inflammation. That inflammation could cause all sorts of other problems. So trying to find something that's a little bit less highly processed sugar, a little bit less fried, is probably going to help us feel better anyway. And with all cravings, I always encourage my clients, whether it's to do with menstrual cycle, whatever, to check what your mind is saying. Are you wanting it because it's an emotional thing? Are you just feeling a bit crap and you want something because it makes you feel better? And is there anything else you can do about that? If having a square or so of chocolate is going to make you feel better, brilliant. But if that turns into sort of more of a binging session, then maybe that's not really helping us feel better in the long run. And maybe there's other things that would be more proactive that we can do to help ourselves feel better. Just checking in for questions. So I don't think anybody's popped any in so far. If you have, I can't see it. So hopefully, but yeah, do pop a question in if you have got any. Okay, on to the next question I got in advance. So, what strength exercises should I be doing? Somebody asked. In terms of women, it's really important that we do strength work. As I said earlier, we tend to lose muscle and bone as we go through perimenopause because we lose the estrogen, which is sort of supports the formation of the bone and the muscle. As we lose that estrogen, we have to work even harder to hold on to muscle. And I'm not just talking muscle for the sake of, looking good or for the sake of supporting our training. I'm talking muscle for health and longevity. We need our muscles to get around, to be able to do everything we do in life. And if we only wait until we're feeling really old and decrepit to suddenly say, oh, I need to start building up my muscles, we're not going to be able to do it. Then it's harder to build muscle, but also it's harder to build habit. So however old or young you are, please start adding in some of that strength work. In terms of what you should be doing, something where you can feel your muscles working. So people tend to ask me at this point, is Pilates good enough? And it's good. It's great in so many ways. Pilates is really good in terms of stress reduction. It's really good in terms of supporting our glutes and our core that helps us avoid injury. So I'm not knocking Pilates in any way, but is it really building our strength? I would say in most cases, probably not. It's building our stability, but it's not really building our strength. We're looking for exercises where we can only do kind of 5 or 10 reps before we feel too tired. Now, you might not be able to do that if you don't like going to the gym and you only like training at home. Then you might not get to the 5 or 10, but you still would be wanting something that you could work, you do less reps for because the weights are heavier. So if you like going to the gym, brilliant. You've got a full range of weights there. If you prefer training at home, then get some weights to be able to do some things at home. In terms of what we should be doing as women, we tend to like doing our arms and we like doing our core. And there is nothing wrong with that. We need our arms, we need our core. But what do we use most in life to get around with and in racing? Our legs. So make sure you are training your legs and your lower back. Lower back is one of the areas, and hips are the two areas that as women we're most vulnerable to bone injuries in. Strength and conditioning or strength work, again, is going to help to strengthen those bones. So things like squats, things like lunges, things like deadlifts are all really, really good for building up that leg strength. So those would be my recommendations. I would also, if you are a runner, you should be doing calf raises. Nobody likes them, but we should be doing 3 sets of calf raises 3 times a week, aiming for 25 to 30 single leg calf raises. If you're not there yet, build up to it. We also want to be doing stability work, which you'll be getting through that Pilates class, some glute strengthening, some core strengthening, and some mobility work. If you want some support in all of that, then I do a Club Feel Fit session once a week, which takes you through pretty much everything I would include in strength and conditioning for women. And I also do a weekly mobility session, just a 10-minute kind of kick the week off to a good start with some mobility work. That you can find details on my website, but you also it's included for free or included within my membership. So if you're interested in my membership, let me pop those details up again. Then you can find details there, and that gives you that weekly strength and conditioning with everything I think you should be included in there. I would also, I gave you details of the strength exercises, but I would also, as a woman, be including plyometrics, again, to be strengthening our bones. Balance, we lose our balance as we get older, we need to train it. Pelvic floor work, even if we haven't had kids, we definitely want to be working our pelvic floor. Breathing work, there's loads of other stuff, and that's all in there in those Club Feel Fit sessions. So I got another question in on the impact of the menstrual cycle. I got lots of questions or comments in terms of the impact of the menstrual cycle on training. This particular person said, my energy and speed depends on where I am in my cycle, and it's getting worse in my 40s. And I'm worried how much worse it will get when I get to perimenopause. So as I already said, I would be tracking your symptoms. I would be getting to know when in your cycle you feel better and when you don't feel so strong in terms of training, and make sure you play to those strengths. So do the harder sessions when you feel stronger, and keep the easy stuff for when you're not feeling so good. When you're not feeling so good, it's really, if we haven't tracked it and we just go, and so many of my clients, when I first start working with them, don't track their training until I suggest it. And then they realize there is a pattern, even though they didn't think there was a pattern. So make sure you're tracking it. And I probably don't just mean on one of those apps, because it's quite hard to see patterns. I think the easiest way is just to have a notebook, write things down, whether it's on your computer, whether it's a notebook on your phone, whatever. But then you can look for those patterns and see how things change. You might notice you get certain symptoms, and then that's followed by other symptoms and other symptoms. I'm not necessarily talking even about a menstrual flow here, blood, bleeding. I'm talking about all those other symptoms which go with things. So track those symptoms, know when you're going to be feeling strong so you can do your strong stuff. Know when it's better to be taking complete rest or when it's better to be just keeping things easy. And then you're less likely to be beating yourself up for not being able to do those harder sessions. We don't need to be doing hard sessions every week. In terms of menopause, yep, we need to be tracking even more when we get there, and things become even harder and less reliable, but there are still patterns in there, or there's at least knowing what you can do on a good day. And if you start that training session and it feels too hard, knowing that that's not the day to be doing those breakthrough sessions and you just go back to doing an easy session. Again, most people, when I first start working with them, are not good at doing easy sessions. We do each session as hard as we can go on that day, and actually learning to do easy sessions easy so we can get hard sessions hard is one of the biggest breakthroughs we get through in terms of being able to do speed work. So then I got a question about, and it's from a Lucy. So I have a soft spot for the question already, another Lucy. So how bad is it to only train for two disciplines, swim and run, and just hope for the best on the bike? So I would say back to this Lucy, and it's not me. I love the bike. I probably do more than bike than anything else. What are your goals? If your goal, and I presume we're talking a triathlon race here by the nature of the question, if your goal is to get to the end, then you're probably fine, with a caveat that I'll come back to. But if your goal is to do well, then I would say you're definitely leaving yourself vulnerable by not focusing on that one thing. And then I would ask why. Why is it that you're not doing the bike? Because that's going to give us a lot of answers as to how big an issue it is or not to address. There's lots of people that talk about training just your strengths or training your weaknesses. And I kind of can see both of those approaches, but I would say we want to make sure we're well-rounded in everything. And I would add to the swim and the run and the bike, we also want to be doing strength and conditioning, and as we get closer to race day, at least a little bit of practice around transition. In terms of the issues of not training the bike, first of all, are you leaving yourself open to a danger here? As I said before, if you only train the run and the swim, it's probably fine so long as you've not got a kind of really aggressive goal, unless there's a risk that you're actually going to come off the bike or fall or just feel really, really unsafe on it. Because if you're not training the bike because you're scared of the bike, you don't like the bike, then chances are your handling isn't that good. So there's a risk there. There's a risk that you're just going to be slower because you haven't practiced it so much, but there's also a risk of a fall. So check the course. If the course is technical, then I'd say you definitely want to be training the bike. In terms of how you go on race day, whether it's about going fast or just having an easier day and therefore enjoying it more, bear in mind that the longest amount of time you spend in the race is probably likely to be the bike. And the impact of the bike is definitely the longest because the bike massively impacts on the run. You can't really separate out the bike and the run. If you go too hard on the bike because either you go too hard because you want to go hard or because you just haven't trained it and so you are going too hard by default, it's going to have a massive impact on the run. So you could do all the run training you like in the world, but if you haven't trained the bike, your run is going to suffer. Going back to the why don't you want to do the training? If it's fear or if it's dislike of the bike, maybe we'll actually achieve more by training and addressing that fear or that dislike. So see your training as an opportunity to overcome any issues you've got with it, whatever it is. For other people, it might be something completely different, often strength and conditioning. But use your training as a time to overcome those fears or those issues. Work on your mindset. That's something I talk a lot about in my coaching, making sure we're clear what thoughts we've got in our mind around doing something and asking ourselves if they're actually true, and how can we work on reframing those thoughts, finding more positive thoughts that serve us better. If it's about the time that cycling takes, have you got a turbo? Could you do turbo sessions? Could you do spin sessions? Something that's not going to take so much time. You still want to work on those skills, but you can definitely build a hell of a lot of fitness and also skills in terms of pedal stroke and constant pedaling, things like that, and mindset on the turbo. And always remember that something's better than nothing. So even if you can't get a big, massive cycle in, something's going to be better than nothing. This Lucy also said in part of another question somewhere that she trains 6 days a week. So I would say if you're training 6 days a week, surely there's an opportunity to swap out at least one of those sessions there. And often it's just a matter of breaking down that fear, breaking the back of the session. And once we start doing it, we find it's not nearly as bad as we thought it was. Again, I don't know what the barrier is, but okay. Then I got a few questions around nutrition and particularly protein requirements. So in terms of protein requirements, an average human being, the UK, who is it, FDA? No, that's in the States. Anyway, the UK government recommends that we have about 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So check what you are in kilograms. Are you getting at least 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight? But that is for the general population. As an active person, and particularly an active woman, and I've already talked about how as women, we're vulnerable to losing muscle with all those impacts, not just on our training, but on our quality of life. And muscle protects protein. So as an active person, the recommendation is at least 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, up to 2 or 2.5 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. And we want to be getting, so that's our daily requirement. We also want to make sure that around training, we're getting about 30 grams. That could be pre-training, that could be post-training. So 30 grams of protein around our training sessions to help our body deal with everything that we put them through. Training, as I already said, is about breaking down our body. And so we want to make sure we're giving our body that support to rebuild. And protein, as well as carbohydrate, are the building blocks for doing that. We need that protein for lots of essential processes in our body, but particularly for rebuilding our body in terms of when we train and break it down, rebuilding it stronger. So the protein is the building blocks of being able to do that. If you don't think you're close to getting that, and lots of people, and particularly women, tend not to be as close as they should be on their protein requirements, check a typical day. So tomorrow, and don't put it off to another day because you'll always put it off. Tomorrow, when you have your breakfast, and I would definitely recommend having breakfast, when you have your breakfast, have a look at what you eat. And I don't recommend weighing things on a daily basis, but just for one day, weigh what you typically eat and look at the information on the back of the packet, or Google it if it's not in a packet, and find out what the typical amount of protein in there is. Do the same for your typical lunch, do the same for your typical dinner, and see how much you're getting. For most of us, we want to be getting about 30 grams of protein in at each meal, and then that 30 grams around training. So check how far away you are from that. And if you're not near enough to it, think, can you supplement throughout the day? And what could you do to bulk up those meals? We want to make sure we're getting a decent source of protein in at every meal. For the veggies and vegans out there, there's lots of great sources of protein, but a lot of them aren't that high in protein. So things like your lentils, your chickpeas, your pulses, all of those sort of things, you'll probably only be getting about 8 grams in a typical serving. So you want to be supplementing that. That could be with some sort of, what are they called? Edamame, your soybean, your sort of frozen peas, but they're soybeans. They're really good. I think they're another 8 grams or something. So you could have those as a side portion. You could be using something like tofu, like tempeh. You've got your kind of fake meat, your corn, and all of those sort of things. So thinking how you can bulk out those meals. In terms of the pre-post training snack, I tend to just go for a shake. It's easy. If you don't like pre-made stuff, you don't like the artificial things, then just get a natural, either a whey protein powder or a vegan protein powder, and mix it yourself with some milk, maybe with some maple syrup for flavor, maybe some coffee or something. So it's still manufactured. I'm not saying that it's not processed, but it's a lot less processed than something that's got a whole load of artificial flavors in there. If you want some more suggestions, I did a video on this last week. It's on my Instagram. It's also on YouTube under the YouTube Shorts. So there's some suggestions on there of where you can get more protein from. Just checking for questions coming in. Okay, so Anya, if you're still there, can you just pop something as a question in now? Because I can just check that comments are coming through, and I don't know if it's that I'm not seeing them or they just aren't coming through. But if anybody's on right now, could you just pop hello in or something, and then I can check that things are coming through. I had another question about dealing with male-dominated training spaces. So first of all, again, go back to that mindset and check what is the problem there. Is there an actual problem, or is it a thought that there's a problem? So are people making you feel unwelcome, or is it your thought saying that you don't feel welcome or you feel intimidated? If it's a thought here, it's something we can try and change. It's something we can work on. Thank you for those posting the comments in there. Thank you. I've got them from Facebook. I'm not sure if I'm seeing them from Instagram, but hopefully I am. So if it's about a thought, check your thoughts. Get used to listening to your thoughts. Your thoughts are not facts. They are things that are in our mind. Sometimes they're true. Often they're not, but they're an opinion. So ask yourself, is that thought true and is it serving you? If it's not serving you, how could you work on changing it? Can you reframe it? Can you find a different way of looking at that thought? So yes, you're in a male training space. It feels different, but does that have to feel wrong? Does that have to feel uncomfortable? Or is it just something to challenge yourself on? We grow through challenge. So to challenge yourself to get used to. If it's about that those males are actually making you feel uncomfortable through their actions, sometimes it's something they don't realize. Sometimes we can talk to them about it. Sometimes that's not so, it's not possible. So if you're in a club, is there a welfare officer, something like that you can speak to, or speak to the committee about saying, is there something that you can do, maybe on the back of International Women's Day, to try and make the club more welcoming for female members? So there's, it absolutely depends on the issue with that male dominated space, what the problem or what the issue is there, as to how we go about changing it. But remind yourself, you have got just as much right to be there. I think this issue often comes up in the context of group rides, particularly. I'd suggest in the context of group rides, asking for some clarity on what's the expected speed that the group's going to be riding at, so if it's appropriate. If you're worried you're going to be holding everybody up, then check if that's a real fear or if it's an unfounded fear. What speed are they going to be riding at? And is that a speed that you're comfortable riding at? If it is, then you should be fine. And remember, when you're riding in a group, so long as you're riding close to the person in front, or as close as you feel confident and safe to do, you're actually going to be able to go faster because you're drafting. So you should be able to go faster in a group situation than by yourself. But check for that clarity in terms of the speed, so if it's an appropriate ride. If it's not, if they're going faster than you would feel comfortable going, then try asking around and see if there's other people that want to go at the same sort of speed as you. I speak to lots of women, not all of whom, but lots of whom tell me that they're worried to go on club rides because they're worried that they can't keep up. So there's lots of people out there who are either having that fear or who actually can't keep up. Can you all get together and do a shorter ride? So long as somebody's got a route, so long as somebody knows where they're going, then, I'll leave it as to what the risk assessment and your club policies around that are. But, get together with somebody else who wants to do a shorter ride. Or often if you ask, there'll be other people who maybe are going faster, but will be happy to do that shorter or slower ride with you. So see what you can do to make it happen, rather than just kind of worrying and letting these thoughts dominate worries dominate your thoughts. In terms of, so there was a few people mentioning different things to do with losing their periods, and I didn't get loads more details from them, but I would always say, if you don't have a period, you need to know why. Now, obviously, as we go through to perimenopause, we start to lose our periods. Often we get sort of crime scene periods in the build up. So it's not just we start perimenopause and no more periods, I'm afraid. They come with vengeance. But often that can be a reason that we get less regular or less frequent periods as we go through perimenopause. But if you are younger than that, and if you're not on oral contraception, then you should be having a regular period. If you're not, I would first of all check with your doctor to make sure it's not a health issue, something that they need to look into. And if they're not looking into it, fight for it, because sometimes we need to fight slightly harder for these things because doctors don't always listen to us. So again, having that tracking to be able to say, look, this is what was normal for me and this has changed, is going to give you some evidence to be able to go to the doctor with. But if it's that it's reduced potentially because you're under fueling, then that's something that we can and should do something about. You may need to speak to a specialist about it, but we need to make sure that we are fueling our training. You do not need to be the skinny person. You do not need to be losing weight to have lost your period due to under fueling. So low energy availability, or it's kind of what comes next, is called RED-S, relative energy deficiency in sport. Those are serious conditions where we lose our period, and we, with that, lose the hormones that go with our period. And with that, we lose that protection to our bones and our muscles. Particularly if we spend significant amounts of time where we're not having that period when we're younger, we're going to really suffer with our bones later on, because we need to be building our bones while we're younger, while we still have those hormones to help us. So looking at trying to get that fueling in again, making sure that we're getting enough fueling in. Carbohydrates before our session. So about 30 grams of carbohydrates before our session. During our session, if it's a longer session, it obviously completely depends on what sort of session you're doing, how long and everything. But generally, whether it's carbohydrates just from the meal we've had before or that we take on specially for that session, we want to make sure we're fueling our training with carbohydrates. If you are training first thing in the morning, you are fasted by definition because you probably haven't been eating overnight. So again, you need to get something in. It doesn't have to be a full meal. You don't have to get up for breakfast and have it 2 hours earlier or something, but something, a banana, some rice pudding, a smoothie, something gentle on your stomach. Could be race products, your gels and your blocks or whatever, but I tend to go for more natural things, dried fruit or something to get in to help your body do that training session. So please, please, please do not accept a loss of period. It is not normal. It is not proof that you are training well. It's something that we want to address in order to help us, have a healthy body, but particularly be rebuilding that bone or building that bone. Just checking in for any comments. So just a reminder, everything I'm talking about today, I will be talking about more in my session on Wednesday, 12:15 and 7 p.m. on Wednesday on training as a woman, more detail on everything I'm talking about today on building up your training as a woman, and then midday on Thursday, specifically on perimenopause. So if you want more information on either of those, please do join the session. There's details up on my website now. I don't know how to make all the different banners disappear. There we go. There is details there of the URL to register at. So final question I've gotten in advance if I don't get anything else submitted. So do pop those questions in if you want to. I've just seen some notes here. Cool. So lots of questions about time, fitting our training in around all the different responsibilities we have in life, whether that's work, whether that's kids, whether that's parents, whether that's pets, whether that's everything else. And I think, this affects men and women, but I think it probably particularly affects women. We tend to do more of the unpaid care work. We tend to take on responsibilities and feel responsible for others, even when we don't necessarily need to be, or where it's not necessarily only up to us. So some things to consider, and it completely depends on your situation here. And I'm not saying any of this with judgment. I'm just asking them as questions for you to think about. So if you are struggling to get your training in around all of those other life responsibilities, do your goals need to change? And that can be a training goal. That can be something else in life. If you've got 10 different projects on the go, do you need to let go of one of them so you can spend more time in the things that you want to prioritize? So do your goals need to change? Do you need to, rather than be training for a half Ironman, just go for an Olympic because it does take less time to train for it? Or is it that your expectations around that race should be changing? So rather than, you're still going to do that half Ironman, but rather than expecting to place in the top half of the table, trying to beat your time from when you were 10 years younger, trying to beat the time of somebody else in your club who's 10 years younger than you, or who doesn't have kids or doesn't have the same stuff. You don't know what's going on in other people's lives. So we spend so much time comparing ourselves to other people without knowing what their situation is. So do our goals need to change? Do our expectations need to change? Do our boundaries need to change? Like I say, women are very good at taking on all this sort of unpaid care duties, and some of them we can actually say no to. Again, I don't know the situation in your life, but sometimes we can learn to put in those boundaries. Do we need to be looking for quality over quantity? So often women are training to burn calories. We're training for a million different reasons, but there's always that little thing at the back of our mind saying, I want to burn calories, I want to lose weight. And so we want to do more and more of it. But if we're training for results as well, maybe we need to do less training, but quality. And that can go along with losing weight as well, because when we're just training hard all the time, we're not getting that high intensity in there. We're not getting that strength work in there, which can both be really important with helping us in weight loss if that is a goal. So looking for quality over quantity. Could we ditch some of the perfectionism? We don't always have to do the session exactly as planned, exactly as we plan to do it. Something is always better than nothing. So learning to accept that good enough is good enough. Do we need to change our planning? So is it that we've got the time, but we're just not very good at planning how to get everything in? So one of the biggest differences I'll see with my clients in terms of getting their training done is, number one, having a training plan. So you actually know what you're trying to do and you don't just always default to the thing that you like doing the most. So having a training plan, that's something I talk a lot about in the membership. There's a whole module on that, or a whole talk on that, masterclass on that in terms of planning for that. So have a look at that if you're interested. But yeah, learning to plan our week at the beginning of the week or the end of the week, whenever works for you. But when are you going to get your training in? Looking at comparing that with the rest of life. When can you fit things in? Or is it about building habits? Or people often talk to me about needing more motivation. I'd say rather than more motivation, we need more habits. We need to make things easier for ourselves by building those habits that help us get the training in. So hopefully that helps with your issues around time and juggling. But, you know, there are a lot of things going on in life. And as I say, sometimes we just need to choose either whether we're going to change our goals or just accept that we can't be doing 100% in everything. Let me pop there we go, that QR code. So if you are interested in joining the rest of the sessions this week, if you're on your phone right now, that's not going to help you. I guess you can take a screen grab, but if you're not, then you can flash your phone at that. So that's the URL for joining the sessions for the rest of this week. Wednesday on Training as a Woman, Thursday as working with training through your menopause. If you have got any questions, pop them in now, but I am not seeing any coming in, and I'm just checking again through here. If you have any other questions, you've got my details at Feel Fit with Lucy as well, so you can pop those questions through to me there and I'll do my best to answer them. And I can add them into the sessions on Wednesday and Thursday as well. So I will hope to see you there. Let me get rid of that. There we go. That was the one I was trying to flash up before. So see you on Wednesday or Thursday. If you, I've said it all. See you on Wednesday or Thursday. It's lovely to see you. Thank you, everybody who sent in questions in advance. And I look forward to seeing you maybe out on the road training somewhere in my membership. Give me a shout if you're interested in that, or in the sessions later this week. Take care, everybody, and have an amazing International Women's Day this weekend. Take care.